Good afternoon, Para family. I can never tell when this actually starts coming through, so I hope that you can hear me. Great to see Honey, George, Angela, Ivan, and whoever else is behind your screens here with us. It is nice to know that people are actually listening when I speak. It still says 0 people connected, so I'm just trying to wait until a number comes up, so that I know that you can hear me. Okay, the number has come up. That's looking good. All right, welcome to our Bible study. And I've tried to choose a slightly shorter passage. Well, the passage chose itself, really. And we'll see if I can actually get through it in 10 minutes without going into a major rush. So we're looking at Zechariah chapter 1 from verse 18 to 21, which is the second of the visions. I'm just going to read it first for us. Then I looked up, and there before me were 4 horns. I asked the angel who was speaking to me, "What are these?" He answered me, "These are the horns that scattered Judah, Israel, and Jerusalem." Then the Lord showed me 4 craftsmen. I asked, "What are these coming to do?" He answered, "These are the horns that scattered Judah so that no one could raise his head, but the craftsmen have come to terrify them and throw down these horns of the nations who lifted up their horns against the land of Judah to scatter its people." And we are just reminded about the context of this, that Zechariah is writing in the time when the people have just started work on rebuilding the temple. It has been delayed for 16 years because of the opposition of the locals, but they have now begun to start again, but they are pretty discouraged. And Zechariah now goes into a time where he has a night with 8 visions. Last time we spoke about the first vision, where the important thing was that God spoke words of comfort to Zechariah to say that Jerusalem will be restored. Everything will be okay again. And now we come to look at the second one of the visions that he has. I'm just trying to make sure I have all my pieces of paper in the right place here. I just thought an interesting thing in terms of context as well that I haven't mentioned, and perhaps other people have thought of, is that Nehemiah, of course, has not yet arrived on the scene. Nehemiah only comes later. So in the last 16 years that they've been there, the people have been building their own houses, but they haven't rebuilt the walls, they haven't rebuilt the temple. In fact, they've been pretty self-centered in terms of just making sure that their actual place where they have to live is okay. I'm not sure that I can blame them, but just to get the context of that. So the walls are still broken down, the temple is still broken down, and this is where the people are. So the vision starts with the words, "Then I looked up," and that is kind of one of those phrases. That's just to say, here is a new vision. And you'll see it happens again, or there's slightly other phrases that just begin to say, okay, Zechariah is now thinking about the old vision, or some reason immersed in it, and now he refocuses, and there's something new that is happening. It doesn't set a new context. We're not sure if he still visualizes himself on the valley outside Jerusalem. It doesn't give us any sense of where he is actually seeing these images that he is seeing. So I think we can choose for ourselves where we think it should be. It's possibly not terribly important to the story, but we will see as we go along. And there before him he sees 4 horns. Now I think we all, okay, let me admit for myself, when I start seeing horns and things in these visions, I start thinking, oh gosh, horns are complicated things. I don't really always know what they mean. And so I thought, well, let's actually take a little bit of time and look at this idea of horns, because the passage is short and we've got time to go and see. To say, firstly, the number 4 is not, as far as we know, deeply significant. Jewish numerology has great significance to certain numbers. Number 3 is the number of completeness. The Trinity is 3. There are 3 patriarchs. Number 7 is the number of perfection. 12 is the number of completeness, the 12 tribes of Israel. Number 4 doesn't seem to have any specific meaning, but it comes up so often in visions and dreams that we study. So we say, okay, there's 4. It doesn't really necessarily tell us very much. But then we get to this idea of a horn. And I think, knowing that I'm speaking to people that have studied the Bible quite a lot, you would know that a horn is a symbol of power, a symbol of strength, and that whenever we read about in the Bible about a horn, it means something powerful. It might be specifically to a king or to a ruler, or it might just be a general sense of power. And I'd like to take us in the next few minutes to some ideas in the Bible of where a horn comes up. So if you want to follow with me, I haven't looked them up myself, so the time that it takes me to get there is maybe time for you to get there as well. Because I know there were so many of them, and I really would like to read some of them. To start at Exodus chapter 30. So if you want to follow in your Bible to Exodus chapter 30, we're going to read verses 1 to 4 and verse 10. This is now the making of the altar of incense in the tabernacle. Moses has already given the instructions for the altar of burnt offerings, which is very similar. But we know that on the altar, or perhaps you will remember, the altar also had horns. Make an altar of acacia wood for burning incense. It is to be square, a cubit long and a cubit wide and 2 cubits high. Its horns of one piece with it. Overlay the top and all the sides and the horns with pure gold, and make a gold molding around it. Make 2 gold rings, okay, etc., etc. And then if we go to verse 10, once a year Aaron shall make atonement on its horns. This annual atonement must be made with the blood of the atoning sin offering for the generations to come. It is most holy to the Lord. So we see that the altars were made with horns on the corners. I was wondering what sort of horns. I must admit I don't have very much faith in the one commentary that I have been using. I'll find another one for next time, because I didn't find it very useful. But I think, and you will see as we go along why, that we need to visualize the horn of an ox, not necessarily the horn of a ram, which is like the shofar, or the horn of a goat, but probably is like the horn of an ox or a horn of a bull. So it's a sort of a curved horn coming out of the corner of the altar there. And it's on that horn that the blood of the sacrifice must be put. Then in terms of this kind of thinking, I want us to go to 1 Kings 1, the first book of Kings, chapter 1, and that's going to be verse 50. And here we see, in the sense of the horns of the altar and the sacrifice, when Solomon became king, one of the first things he did was to start getting rid of those people that had opposed David and had caused David trouble. And what these people did time after time again, okay, I'm going to read 1 Kings 1 from verse 49. At this all Adonijah's guests rose in alarm and dispersed. But Adonijah, in fear of Solomon, went and took hold of the horns of the altar. Then Solomon was told, Adonijah is afraid of King Solomon and is clinging to the horns of the altar. And so the people, when they were afraid of what Solomon was going to do, would run into the tabernacle and hold on to the horns of the altar. And the idea was that they were taking refuge there, saying, our God to whom we sacrifice, the God that forgives us, we come here and we hope that the king will also have mercy on us, which sometimes happened and sometimes didn't happen, as it is. That is one set of the understanding of the horn of the altar, whether we see that as the horn of God's power that is somehow appeased by the blood of sacrifice. It could be. And then to go to Deuteronomy 33. This is now a slightly different sense of the meaning of the word horn, of how it's used. Deuteronomy chapter 33. Here Moses is blessing the different tribes as they're about to go into across the river into Israel. Deuteronomy 33 verse 17. And in particular here he is blessing the tribe of Joseph. In majesty he is like a firstborn bull. His horns are the horns of a wild ox. With them he will gore the nations, even those at the ends of the earth. And this one, I think, is helpful in understanding what we mean by a horn. It's a horn of a wild ox with the power to go and to gore and to kill and to conquer. Then we go to Psalm 92. Here we start to see we've seen a pretty poetic interpretation so far already, but Psalm 92, verse 8 to 10 I've got here. Psalm 92, 8 to 10. But you, O Lord, are exalted forever. For surely your enemies, O Lord, surely your enemies will perish. All evil doers will be scattered. You have exalted my horn like that of a wild ox. And so there we have the idea of the psalmist having a horn, which obviously he doesn't literally, but as his horn is exalted, as God lifts him up and gives him power. Then to go to Lamentations chapter 2. Let's see how well I can find Lamentations. This is such a small book. Lamentations chapter 2, verse 3. In fierce anger he has cut off every horn of Israel. He has withdrawn his right hand. And then Lamentations 2, verse 17. The Lord has done what he planned. He has fulfilled his word. And to the end of the verse, he has exalted the horn of your foes. So here is that sense of power, of God taking away power, of God giving power. In this little section I wanted to put, but we haven't got time, the song of Hannah, when Samuel is prophesied to be born, and how she says, God has exalted my horn. And then also the song of Zechariah, where he says that God has sent his horn of salvation. And so, yeah, we see this sense of power. I'm not going to take us to Daniel and Revelation. I will leave them to you because I think we probably all know the apocalyptic stories there. Daniel 7, where there's all the different sort of beasts with horns on their heads and what they mean. And Revelation chapter 12 and others, where we also have a whole bunch of sorts of beasts and animals and monsters with horns coming out of their heads. These passages in Daniel and Revelation we know are often able to be interpreted where those horns are specific kings and specific countries that are being prophesied about. I mean, Daniel particularly, one can put this horn to being that king in a very specific and very accurate way. So we come to Zechariah and he says he sees 4 horns. We're kind of asking ourselves, what are these 4 horns? There could be the 4 horns of the altar. There could be the 4 horns like the horns of an ox, the horn of the enemy that has been exalted. Or it could be literally, we must take each of those horns and say, this is a king, and this is a country, and this is a power. So, yeah, if there are specific kings, it could be Egypt, Babylon, Assyria, Persia and the Medes together with the country of the Medes and the Persians. It could be those 4. Or we could just take them as a generalized idea of the powers of the nations around, of those that are opposing Israel. For myself, I prefer the generalized one, but I can't say that I'm right. Perhaps it is a specific meaning, but I just don't quite see it fitting as specifically as well as it does in Daniel. But then the next thing that comes up in Zechariah chapter 1 is there are the 4 craftsmen. And so the Lord shows him 4 craftsmen, and Zechariah says, what is going on? What are these craftsmen? The old Bible apparently translated them blacksmiths. And so my commentator says, well, maybe the horns were made out of iron, and so a blacksmith was appropriate. I'm curious to hear what other people say in the Zoom meeting later. I'd be very interested to hear what the other commentaries said, because there is a suggestion that these craftsmen are simply the other nations that come and conquer and reconquer and I don't know, wreak God's wrath, as it might be. But I very much prefer to think that we see references to craftsmen in the building of the temple, particularly in the building of Solomon's temple. We know that God raised up craftsmen. There were craftsmen in the building of the tabernacle, that God raised up particularly skilled people. And in the context of where we're writing, it seems to me that these craftsmen, God is saying, as you guys get the craftsmen to work in rebuilding that temple, this is going to be the power that terrifies the nations. This is going to be the thing that drives them away and gives you safety. When you return your center to God, and you put your trust in him. Uh, so although commentators can argue and discuss about which nation each craftsman refers to and what this and what that, I really think it is much simpler than that. But as I say, I'm very curious to hear what other people have to say. And so that really comes to the end of it, where it's again a word of comfort, where God is saying to Zechariah, things look rough, things look tough, but when you get those guys rebuilding the temple, things are going to come right again. So thank you very much for people tuning in and listening, whether you watch now or you watch later. It's been great to have you. I enjoy the study for myself because it forces me to listen and to the word, but it's great to have people along with us. So we are going to move to Zoom, those of us here, and we will see you all then.